modeling clay, elastic bands. We had the move controllers stuck onto this contraption.
They allowed you to acquire targets much more quickly.
There was something really special there, and that was the time when we knew we needed to follow this.
We sat down with Greg Corman and Seth Louisi, founders of Impulse Gear, developers of Farpoint, and the new upcoming shooter, Larsenauts.
All right, Captain. I got the intel.
What we didn't expect, though, was to find that they themselves created the aim controller that went hand in hand with their first game, Farpoint. And the device wasn't necessarily always intended to be for PSVR either. It didn't come out of nowhere, though. Louisi's origins in the games industry perfectly maps out how we got such an incredible controller.
I started with Sony many years ago, so I was there, I was a producer and director of development, and I spent a lot of my time creating and working on the SOCOM franchise.
This confrontation will not be an easy one, but there is no other place we would rather be. Today is our opportunity to prove to the world that we are the ultimate special ops warriors.
As well as working with Zipper Interactive on MAG. Did a lot of online shooters there, and sort of some of the first ones for console, which was exciting times. And then, when VR came along, it was really was a good opportunity to kind of take everything I've learned about making an online shooter and making shooting games in general, and then apply that to VR.
Soon after our homemade experiment started in 2010, we kicked off our official R&D work to create a VR headset optimized for gaming.
I mean, basically, Sony Electronics came out with a head-mounted display, had no tracking, just had a screen, but immediately people wanted to try out different demos on it and see what could be done with it and see if this could become, basically the fabled VR that people have been talking about forever. Got to see a lot of those early prototypes while I was there at Sony, but it was still many, many years after that before PSVR was announced and came out.
Not only did Louisi work on some of the best shooters on PlayStation, but he worked side by side with Sony Interactive Entertainment to create the AIM controller's predecessor.
I also worked on the Sharpshooter, which was a controller thing you plug the move into. We supported it on MAG and SOCOM 4. So I actually also worked with some of the hardware teams at Sony on doing some of the headsets and other things that were bundled with SOCOM. So I had a lot of experience working with the peripherals team, working with the system software team in Japan, and kind of designing these things out. And one of the things we were looking at was, how can we make that Sharpshooter more than what it was? At the time, you plug the move into it, and it was similar to what you would get with the Wii, where it was just you were aiming a cursor around on the screen, and that's kind of what it was. It was just a virtual mouse, which wasn't very interesting. But even then, we tried doing some prototypes where we added one-to-one tracking. This was before and then the VR stuff came out. So we were doing some of the focus groups and give people the Sharpshooter, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is amazing! I'm going to be able to use it and aim around in the game, and it's all going to be fully tracked." But it wasn't any of that. But that's when we kind of got some of the ideas that, well, we should try to do that, even though we're still limited to a TV screen. So we added some extra tracking onto it and actually had the Sharpshooter fully tracked one-to-one. This was way back on PS3 to just sort of see, like, well, what does it feel like? And it felt great. I mean, it instantly allowed you to acquire targets much more quickly. So rather than having to scroll a cursor around, you would just aim at it, and it was much more intuitive. We also tried adding like a move on a hat, and you would like turn the screen by doing this, and that was good too. And then you could aim, you could look up and down and get some camera movement in there along with the controller. But then that's when it kind of started to break down, because you'd have to look to the right, the screen's over here, so you're like looking sideways at the screen to see what's going on, and while you're using your head to control it.
So it was the early 2010s, and VR had next to no track controllers yet. But Louisi and Corman needed them to create the kinds of games they wanted to make. So they decided to take it into their own hands, and thus Impulse Gear was born.
The people started creating these VR headsets. It's like, okay, now all the pieces are there. We already had kind of prototyped out some of the stuff, controllers and one-to-one movement. Now you have the headset, and then just putting it all together was like a big part of what Greg and I actually did, and that's one of the main reasons why we founded the company, was to do just that, because at the time there were no track controllers. Sony hadn't even decided to include the Move. Everything was just using Xbox controllers and regular controllers, and we felt that you needed to have that track controller to go along with it to really sell that experience, which lives up to the expectations of what people were expecting for these type of games. So that was one of the big reasons why we started Impulse Gear, to bring all that together and deliver that experience in VR.
When we saw the mixture of a DK1 and a track controller, which we had to create, basically. This was before there were any track controllers on the market. We were just looking at how do we get this to work together, and we figured that out pretty quickly, and that's the magic. I think anyone who's played VR knows that as soon as you can interact with your world with your hands, there's something really special there. And that was the time when we knew we needed to follow this. We needed to really explore what you can do with this. So it's a really cool moment. And then you're like, oh wait, there's so much more we can do. We got to make a company and make this happen. There's a lot of fun experiments, and then games, full-on games that we've been making for virtual reality. And that's the real core reason we got into this business.
The left-hand side photo was taken back in fall 2010. They duct tape PS Move controller on a low-res viewer called Headbrake.
We had a hardware prototype, and we are definitely a software company, but we had a hardware prototype of the AIM controller, what turned into the AIM controller. So it definitely was using modeling clay, elastic bands. We had the Move controllers stuck onto this contraption to allow us to aim around. Like, this is not hooked up to the PS4 at all. This is hooked up to the PS3, sending data packets over to the PC that were running a Rift on a DK2, I think, at the time. And so we have all of this hardware set up. So when we're showing someone for the first time, they come into the room and they see this thing and they're like, what am I actually looking at? What are you trying to show me? Because we had a collection of hardware there. But then, of course, they put the headset on, they have this thing in their hands, and all the hardware melts away, and it's just the experience. And that's really what we were going for, right? The experience of getting in there with the controller. And then, pitching it to people. We had this idea. Sony was an obvious choice for many reasons.
I knew a lot of people there. I had the opportunity to work on, with lots of different groups. So when it did come time to pitch this and this idea, they knew that, they already knew why.
Finding the right partner for that project was really important to us.
It's not all about the controller though. Everything Impulse Gear was making was in service to their groundbreaking VR shooter, Farpoint.
Hi. Our ship is here to analyze a very special wave of radiation.
So we definitely had this idea of what we wanted to deliver when we first created the company. But one of the other big important things, as Greg mentioned, was that we did want to create, full, complete core games for core gamers, because they want those type of experiences. And that's something we always strive to deliver when we're working on these games. It has to be something that somebody who's used to playing a regular console game has a certain level of expectations for what that game should have, and we want to make sure we're delivering that in any game that we create, whether it's VR or not. We're not just relying on the fact that it's VR. It has to have, a lot of those core components that makes it a fun and engaging game as well.
We knew from the start that we wanted to make a game like Farpoint. We didn't have all the details sorted out, but we had this core vision in mind of really what Farpoint came to be. It had a lot to do with the technology, but it also had to do with the type of game we wanted to make, the type of story we wanted to make, the experience that we wanted people to have, and the audience we were going for. And I think that audience is really important. It's the people who want a full-featured game, a game that you can really sink into and get a really good full experience from, and also go back to. Adding multiplayer to Farpoint was something that was really important to us as well. Unfortunately, that was only 1v1. And I love that game. It was a lot of fun to play, and we had interesting things going on, but 1v1 is a big limiting factor.
So what about the future? Could we see Impulse Gear return to the Farpoint universe?
Well, we definitely don't have anything to announce at the moment, but that is our roots, and we're very happy with what we did on Farpoint. Larcenauts itself is a huge universe. There's so much to explore here and get to know and experience. So when we're looking at how to move forward with Impulse Gear, we have a lot to explore in the shooter space as a whole.
You can read the full article over on UploadVR.com, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications button to keep up with the latest Upload Access reveals.
Okay. That's good. Okay, so that's probably a good place to end the video.